Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Fourth Tier Fever. The season might be done, but the content doesn't stop there. Before we start with this episode, if you don't mind hitting that like button, subscribe if you're new around here, that would be greatly appreciated. And make sure you download the podcast and wherever you get your podcast from. It does mean the world to us. The content doesn't stop throughout this summer period. So by downloading the pods, by subscribing to the YouTube channel, you'll be the first to hear when we drop something new. Let's get on to it. But yeah, let's not mess about this week. The season is finally done. The playoffs have been and gone. And we know that AFC Wimbledon were the winners of that playoff final on Bank Holiday Monday, to the absolute joy of Luke Payne over here. AFC Wimbledon are a league above you. Especially after the season you've had, it fills with great pleasure that they're going to be up in League One. And I know you're probably going to come back and say, double relegation and all that. But, it's just great to laugh at. How are you finding it, or how did you find it?
Well, honestly, I think I'm okay at this point because we now have a season where we've got a weaker division, in my opinion, and the circus doesn't have to come to town either. So that's fine. Plus, to be honest, I've already got the good news of our first summer signing.
No,
So
we're not talking about
mentioning
Nathaniel
it.
Mendes.
We're mentioning it.
We can wait.
Nathaniel
About
Mendes.
the circus coming to town. He's clearly got some cash.
Hey, we've got Pool 1. Enough said.
Moving on.
Am I safe to put the headphones back on? Am I safe
on?
to do that? Oh, yeah. I'm not listening to that Luke's name again. Fuming.
Yeah. We've also got Keiron.
Yay! The monthly appearance and whatnot. Fantastic. Living the absolute dream. Until one of my favourite players we've had in recent memory decided to sign for Gillingham. But we got a manager now. Yay! We got a manager, and we've actually got an experienced backroom staff. So I'm a little bit more raring to go for the new season. But playoffs have come and gone. The absolutely massive Real Dons have been promoted, and the franchise finished 19th. Thank you for watching. What a brilliant episode and a brilliant season it's been.
I'm just sitting back because I know that Luke's about to come back to say where Newport finished in the season.
I was just going to say I'll come back to this episode this time next season, but we'll see.
Yeah, we'll come back to it. When AFC Wimbledon are in the championship, still a division above.
They'd be lucky to finish 23rd, let's be real.
We'll see, Luke. We will see. We can have this discussion all day, but that's not the reason why we're doing a podcast today. I'm not sure how many more we're going to do. In regards to this current crop, I know there's one more team yet to be confirmed in League Two. Oldham and Southend play this weekend, and then we'll know our full host of 24 teams. It will be taking part in the 4th division next season. But for this season, as the season's now been and gone, that's it now for a couple of months at least before we start again. We thought it'd be a good idea to do a tier list, basically grading every team's season, basically, whether they lived up to expectations or, in the case of MK Dons, fell flat on its face. Or if you tried something different in Newport this season, again, it's fallen flat on its face. I'm just rinsing you all at the minute. But if it makes you any better, we absolutely balls the playoffs up. So there you go.
Flat on its face, as they say. Or in more professional terms, honked up the gaff.
Yeah, we can go along with that. Yeah, there's not really too much to say. So this is what it is. So it's the old grading system at school. I know it's 1, 2, 3. It's numbers now, isn't it? And grade. So A, of course, being the best. A, B, C, D, E, F, and of course U for ungraded. There might be a few teams going in that one. So pretty self-explanatory. We'll go through the teams 1 to 24 on here. We did have a quick somewhat think through before we press record, and there's conflicting thoughts throughout, but some that's pretty similar. Right, yeah. Let's start, I guess. Let's start from the top here with Accrington Stanley. I think many people predicted them to struggle. Did struggle, but survived. It'll probably be the same again next year. Had some good moments, but yeah, I think I can't put them any higher than F. Truth be told, I don't think they've been as bad as you because they haven't gone down or anything like that. And I know they were in and around that, but I always got the impression there was a couple of sides worse than them, and that ended up being the case. But I can't really justify them putting them any higher than an F. Thoughts?
Yeah, I think I'd agree with that. You could maybe just about say just based on how low their expectations would have been and everything that's going on behind the scenes. But I think even with all of that, for me, I think it has to be an F. They were kind of there or thereabouts in that relegation battle the entire time. There was never really a moment where they looked safe until right at the very, very end. So for me, I think F would be fair.
Yeah, I'm agreed with Luke. I think you can argue E, and I'd just to be different, I'd probably lean it more towards E. But even then, I'm not gonna dispute F. They were expected to struggle. They did. That's kind of it, isn't it? Realistically.
Yeah, I think so. I think there's been, obviously, I think there's obviously been a whole owner situation now, which has somewhat progressed throughout the back end of the season with Andy Holt and God knows what. But like I said, I think many people thought they'd be in this position. I think unknown. I say a little bit of an unknown manager in John Doolan. Big shoes to fill, replacing John Coleman. And I mean, look, he's kept him up, but there's obviously, I think there's still some concerns heading into next season. And I think they'll be struggling again. I think they'll be quite a lot of people's favourites to probably take the drop next season. But in terms of expectations, I didn't expect them to do anything. I think F is probably right. I can see your points for E, but I'm not convinced. Truth be told, like I said, I don't think they've been as bad as you though. So F is where they'll go. AFC Wimbledon, of course, they'll be playing in League One next season. So congratulations to them, winning the playoffs. Of course, they had like a playoff quarter final, as much as they obviously had the two games against Notts County, of course, beating us, keeping four clean sheets in a row in their last four games, which has ultimately got them aligned, and something that's something they've been very good at this season is keeping clean sheets. In terms of expectations, I think certainly from their fans, I think there was certainly optimism that they could take the next step, because they finished out the previous season like a couple of places outside the playoffs, didn't they? And I think if they'd have made the playoffs, it'd have been a very good season, let alone win it. They've been promoted, so I think if they didn't get promoted, I think you're probably looking at a B or perhaps C. I think near the end they faltered a little bit, but I mean, look, you're never going to be perfect. I can see the arguments for, but they've been promoted, so you could maybe put them in A. I don't know, B maybe. It's A or B for me. I think the fact that they've got promoted, I think they have exceeded a few expectations, but I'm not sure what you think.
I'd put them in A. I mean, I know the fans had a sort of certain expectation to reach playoffs or whatever. I think the reality with the way that club is operating, and the finances and resources they have available to them, it's not much realistically. To be up there amongst the teams that actually do, are in a much sort of better position in that sort of financial sense as well. And as you say, I mean, they've been promoted. That's pretty much the best they could have hoped for, really, isn't it? So I don't think they were ever going to finish much higher than that, to be honest. I think that's the best season possible for them. So I think it has to be A.
I mean, you look at automatic promotion, you look at playoffs, all comes with the same outcome. You get promoted. They were in and around it the entire way through the season. I can't say anything other than A.
Yeah.
They were. It's almost similar to a team we'll talk about later on. There was expectation there for them to go up, and they did it. Maybe not as big as an expectation with AFC Wimbledon as this other team that are a little bit further down the list, but. Yeah, I think the expectation was a little bit potentially smaller than a lot of the teams that would have been in and around the top 7, or at least gunning for that. But they've managed to achieve it. And I'd argue if you had an S tier above that, you could argue there as well. I couldn't argue anything other than A for that.
Yeah, and I think for what I was sort of getting at with the B, I think it might have been a little bit nitpicking. I think it was more like the spell near the end, but they've turned it up where it's mattered, and well, ultimately it's culminated in a very successful season. Most clean sheets in the league, the best defense in the league, and ultimately they got promoted. Yeah, it's probably going to have to be A, not C. They've not been that bad. Yeah, and like I said, we wish them well in League One next season. Barrow up next. Started the season off really well, didn't they? Obviously had that really poor run of form, which Stephen Clements lost his job as a result of it. Andy Wing has come in there and has done a solid job. I think there's quite a bit on. I think Barrow could be a team to look out for next year. I think we probably say that with one or two teams, but I keep an eye on Barrow. I wouldn't say they're going to be massively special, like they're going to win the league or anything like that, but they certainly seem like a very, or could be like a well-drilled side. Mixed thoughts. I think. I mean, they've had spells, haven't they, where they've been really good or they haven't. I think the sort of middle of the road, I'm itching towards D. Personally, I don't think they've been as bad as E, but they've had good spells under Randy Wing, and they did at the start of the season. But is it enough to justify C? To be honest, I'm not particularly sure.
I mean, with Barrow, their league positions over the course of the season have fluctuated massively. They started quite well, and then they fell off massively. Obviously, Andy Wynn came in, and they sort of steadied the ship a bit. I think I can't remember exactly where they were last season. I think they're a bit lower, weren't they? 'Cause they did have a reasonable season as well that season.
They threw away the playoffs after being.
Yeah. So I've just pulled it up. So the 22-23 season, they finished 9th. The 23-24 season, of course, the one just before last, they finished 8th, and now they've kind of stagnated and reached 16th.
Probably said that the expectations were high to make that next step, and
yeah, but then you had Pete Wild leave, which I think added a lot of kind of, I wouldn't say discomfort, but a lot of, I suppose, anticipation. You could almost say that this season was a bit of a rebuild in a way. They lost a few players throughout the summer, but I don't know. I think in terms of a transitional season, it was okay. That they were inconsistent, as you potentially would expect a team that have been through 2 managers and lost one the summer prior to be. It's a hard one, isn't it, with Barrow? I'd probably go middle of the road just because it's not building necessarily on the 2 seasons prior, but at the same time, it's not disastrous, and potentially they've built a little bit of ground to have a successful campaign next season out. I'd say D, but it's a hard one.
I think in terms of transitional seasons go, I think with a few teams, and compared to some of the others that have maybe tried it, I think they've dealt with it slightly better than some others. I think there's clubs that have been better than them with it, but it's I probably will say D, to be honest. I know obviously the change of manager brings uncertainty. They did have some good players though, and they did have good spells, they did have bad spells, but it's I'm struggling to know what really more to say from Barrow. Just
There's going to be
solid
a lot
enough.
of
We're never
teams.
going to go up. They were never going to go down.
Yeah, there's a lot of
I think-
teams that are going to be like that, though. Let's be fair.
Yeah. No,
The thing is, the way I'd put it is they kind of fell off a cliff and they've just kind of started climbing again. You know, the start of a project is there after a huge fall off, but they're not far enough along that journey now for us to put them any higher than D.
Yeah, I agree with that.
I think we like you mentioned, Jordan. I think you could be looking at Barrow next season as, you know, maybe not promotion chasing, but in and around that mix. If they get this summer window right, I know to my knowledge, they've not got very similar to Wimbledon. They've not got the most facilities in the world. They've not got stupid amounts of money to throw at players. But I think what they do is smart. I think the way they go about their business is smart, and I can imagine them having a stable and progressive season next time out, and then cue to this time next year when they go down, because that's how this always works.
We'll come back to this in a year's time. But no, absolutely. Bradford up next, and again another team promoted. I think it took them a little bit of time to get going, but ultimately promotion is promotion. Did somewhat falter a little bit at the end, but probably to be expected. They've done enough to get over the line, and yeah, I mean, there's not really much more to say. They've been promoted, and I think they've been one of the better. Certainly for what I've seen at Grimsby in the games that we have played this season, I'd probably say Bradford are probably certainly top 3 teams I've seen us play this season, especially at their place. They do play some good stuff for how they're set up to, and Graham Alexander's ultimately the man that has taken them up. When, to be honest, it looked like for a large period, it still looked at the start of the season, they were going to keep stagnating in League Two. It didn't really look like a way out. Yes, they'd bring in, you know, these good players on good money, but it didn't scream like, I don't know. I think it was just more of a cultural thing. But that's something that's been managed to crack, and they've managed to get out of League Two this year. They've just got it right eventually, and they go in A for me.
Yeah, I think I'd agree with that. To be fair, you know, you've got to give huge credit to the home form that they've been able to build. You know, that place has become a fortress, and I don't. I mean, the expectation was high, but it's always high with Bradford, and normally it just comes crashing down again, and it doesn't really work, and it just kind of ends up being a bit of a joke, to be honest. But they have got it right this season. They followed through, and yeah, I think it has to be A. It's just a case of they've got it right.
I think the thing I've been most impressed about with Bradford this season is something that they haven't done in seasons prior to it, and that they've been a lot more versatile and a lot more capable to use the versatility of their squad to get results. You know, when they lost Andy Cook to injury, we all thought, this will be the time where they do the stereotypical thing and just drop down the league a little bit and finish 10th. Because that's what we associated with Andy Cook being the kind of only outlet of goals for Bradford. But no, they've done really well. Graham Alexander, to give him credit, he's done a boss job. You know, he's managed to work around a really difficult injury in Cook, and yeah, nothing other than A.
Yeah,
But to be fair, I think you would have expected them, as you would have expected them for the what 4 or 5 years that they spent in League Two previous to get promoted. Yeah. But each of their own, they've done it. They've done it under, I'd argue, difficult circumstances on the pitch with injuries and whatnot. And yeah, you gotta give them the credit for that.
Absolutely. Bromley up next, first season as an EFL club. First season in League Two, and yeah, is it because Andy Woodman might give you a bit of a telling off if we don't do that, or
no? It's
I know you're good mates with him.
No. I think my justification for that is you can even use our predictions as much as you probably wouldn't use our predictions as very credible sources, given how they aged horrifically. But what we predicted them, and what a lot of people predicted them to do, was just be towards those relegation places. You know, they didn't do too much over the summer, but they didn't need to. In hindsight, you know, they went on a. Can you argue a late playoff push? maybe not. It was possible, but I think when we even did that interview, Woodman mentioned that Newcastle game and those kind of 5 games in between probably ruined those chances in hindsight. But you pair their league position very, very comfortable, a lot to build on. They are the top scorer in the league. I can't argue anything other than I could understand it because what team wouldn't come into this division with the intention of trying to get straight back up, especially with all the promotion spots that are available to you. But I'd say A, but I could also understand B in the same breath.
I mean, the way I'd go, I would actually say B, but it is purely just because I think, although I think from the outside we're all thinking, oh yeah, they might have an all right season, or a lot of people maybe thought they'd go back down. In house there was more of that belief that they could get playoffs. So that aim was there, and they only just missed out on it, only by 4 points, I believe it was. But they didn't quite get it. It's still been an outstanding season, especially for the amount of resources they've got. You know how limited things have been over there. It's still been an outstanding season, but they didn't achieve their aim, not quite. And it is only very, very minor, but for that reason, I'd drop them just ever so slightly to be.
I think the one thing I would say is the fact that I sort of knew I didn't expect them to do as well as they had done, but I expected them to be quite solid in the division. I think we remember when we did our predictions, I think I had them like 15th, 16th or something like that. I expected them to be more than fine. I never understood the shouts for relegation or anything like that. I just didn't. I saw quite a bit of Bromley in non-league, and they were very, and just with their style, with some of the players, that they were very much suited to EFL football before they even got in there. So I'm not surprised that they've done quite decent. I didn't expect them to do as well as they had done. But I think for me, if they look, it's been a fantastic season regardless, and they've set the standards for next season now. They've set the bar, and I think Bromley's another side to watch out for. If they can get a couple of things right in the summer, I think there's a chance they might have the same success again. I think for me, I can see it. It's tough to call. I get the arguments for A. I'd personally put them in B.
Can we have a tier? Can we have a tier in between A and B for just Bromley? Because that's where they. I think. Yeah, I think. Again, a lot of my justification for it is that a lot of teams that get promoted and then do well, you kind of see them and you go, oh, they were in the EFL this year or these years, but this was their first stint in the EFL, and you can use this for an argument of A and B. They were almost building for the EFL for a number of seasons before, like you mentioned, they finally got over the line. But I think they were so smart to do what they did. He's very much deciding here. You should have made a tier in between. This is horrible. But for me, the reason I'm saying A is almost off the past way they've set up to go into it, and the fact that they've got very, very within touching distance of playoffs. For a first stint in the EFL, you can't ask for much more. I mean, you can say playoffs, but even then, though, you look at what they did over the summer. They didn't need to do too much to have a successful season. If they would have got one or two more bodies over the line, they probably would have got into the top 7. But
right,
saying that, you can chuck them. You know what? I'm going to change my mind. Chuck them in B, because you can almost say that they've got the able bodies and the able squad to where a couple of additions, we could do this next season and put them A. You know, they've got the perfect foundation there to be a promotion pushing team.
Absolutely.
But even then, I'm still half going to argue with you until the sun comes up again. That
I fully get the argument for A. I'm just thinking with I don't know, maybe I don't know.
I mean,
the more I'm
let's
thinking about, the
be
more I
fair,
kind of want to put them A, but we're
yeah,
spending too much time on this one, so
maybe we'll go through and rejig it in a bit if we have time. But saying that, we've
maybe.
got so many teams and we're 25 minutes in.
Yeah, we'll come back. We'll come back to Bromley, see what time we've got at the end. We'll get through these ones very quickly. Carlisle can't crash the season, aren't they? Gone through 3 managers, ended in relegation. I think it's a very quick year, isn't it?
Every tactical decision they got wrong. Simple as that.
Literally, you look at their squad on paper and you thought, yeah, that's a side that looks all right. That's a side that looks like it can do an all right job in this division. But just about everything else that they could have got wrong, they got wrong. And
every big decision the owners had was just the wrong one, and it's just destroyed them.
Yeah,
and they've lost their EFL status as a result.
Yeah,
and we're going back
to it's going to be difficult to get out of it as well.
And we're going back to pre-season expectations as well. We all thought Carlisle would do pretty well, but it just turns out you might have all that money, but if you don't make the right decisions on like recruitment or anything else, or managers, for instance, then it's just not going to work, is it?
Milton Keynes. Sorry.
Yeah, we'll get to them. Cheltenham, a pretty bog standard season. It was what I really expected from them. I don't think it was as bad as F. I can't justify them putting them any higher than D.
I'd probably say D.
Yeah,
I think D's fair.
I think D's fair, but I think you can make an argument for E as well.
Yeah, I think you can. I think
I'd sit them in D because they did have moments. They did have moments where they were sort of pushing that top half quite a bit. They've been quite stable without being consistent.
Yeah.
You see a lot of teams go down from League Two. Carlisle, a perfect example. Forest Green the season before, where you go down, you get accustomed to losing so much from a division above, and it just carries on into the next season. Obviously, it's not as simple as that. You have to make stupidly wrong decisions for it to turn out that way, but I think what Cheltenham did was just understand potentially wasn't realistic to immediately bounce back up. And, they would just solidify themselves in the division, which I think, to be honest with you, they did to an absolute T.
Mm-hmm. Chesterfield up next, made the playoffs, lost to Walsall, who lost the final. I expected them to get into the playoffs. I know they've had the problems this season with injuries and whatnot. Inconsistency. It's hard to say. I'm torn between B and C. They're not A.
For me, I'm saying B just because my predictions weren't potentially quite as high as yours were. But that being said, in the same breath, I can't remember where I put them in our predictions. I can't remember where I put them 7th or 9th or something along those lines, but I put them within that kind of argument that based on the fact that it almost felt that they were stagnated to the top half for a good while and no higher, and then they went on that little bit of a run to clinch into it. I'd say B. Again, same breath, arguably an established EFL club for a number of years beforehand of this, and they've got the squad and the facilities to get promoted. So you could argue C as well.
I mean, I do remember where I predicted them. I had them to finish 7th, and I mean, they were 7th.
I'm gonna have a look as you continue this conversation.
Okay, sounds good. But I don't know. There was obviously more expectation there, but also just the sheer amount of adversity they've had to deal with, and they've still achieved their sort of core target, I suppose. I know they didn't go up, and sort of eventually faltered in the playoffs, but ultimately that I think it perhaps would have been too soon if they had gone up anyway, perhaps. Just because there's not really the stability in that squad just yet with all the sort of various problems they've been having. I certainly don't think. See, I was actually more leaning B towards A because in terms of the project they're building, they are still rising and they're still rising again.
I put them
And
5th. I
oh,
don't
there you
remember
go.
doing that. I put them 5th. Ah,
But yeah, I'd be putting them B minimum. I was more debating between B and A personally.
yeah.
So
I'd say B more than C.
I think for the reason that you give, for the fact that they've had this run near the end, got into the playoffs, and still achieved their target, I think that's enough to put them B. I just don't think they've done quite enough for A. I know that they've had stuff go against it, but I don't know. That's probably just me. Like we'll revisit this at the end, but if we get a chance. Colchester have had a terrific season, haven't they? B for me.
yeah, I mean they've been a slow burner. We all know how I go on about project sides. They are a project side. They had a poor season last season. That they sort of started to come up a little bit under Cowley's. Yes, they haven't quite made playoffs, but they're at a point where they are still building. That progression is there. I'm not worried about how they're going to do next season. They're building well, and for me, that's all you can really hope for after the last few seasons they've had. I think B is entirely fair.
I think B isn't entirely fair. I think the only argument you can make for any lower is that they probably had they had a perfect opportunity to get into playoffs, very similar to a team of a certain host that is on this podcast. They ended up just kind of, falling off towards the end. But even then, I think that the turnaround from what they were to, what they've managed to achieve this season, I'd say B as well.
Yeah, I'll get onto this with obviously Grimsby as well, but it's just sort of felt just like us and them just sort of ran out of steam at the end, and it's probably to be expected. I think.
I think it was for me, for Colchester and Grimsby. I think it was just a season too early to really pushing to ready to get into those playoffs. I can see both getting in and around that top 7 again, and probably one or the other getting into that promotion playoff area. But it's we're not going to get anyone in C this entire time. I can kind of just smell that. I can smell that we're not going to get a single team in C.
Well, there's an interesting one coming up next. We go to Crewe. Very good first half of the season. Very good first half of the season. Appalling second half of the season. And I think who was it that mentioned if it wasn't for Walsall's collapse, I think we don't talk about Crewe's drop off. We don't talk about Crewe's drop off more because of how Walsall threw it away.
And it was that exact same screenshot where we saw Walsall were 14 points clear. Crewe were 3-4 points behind them, something along those lines. So it's an awful fall off, isn't it? Really, where did they finish? 10th, 11th, something like that.
13th. They had playoff ambitions and they finished 13th.
Okay,
They have to be E. They can't be any higher.
They are E or they are simply F, because we talk about Colchester in the way that they've been progressing. Crewe got to the playoff final last season, and now they've completely fallen off a cliff. So you can even argue F there, because it's just a massive backward step.
Yeah, I can see where you're coming from. I'm not sure. I'm not sure they've been that bad though. If we're talking about the same level of acting, but
another 4 or 5 games maybe, and
I think
if another 4 or 5 games of that, and they'd have been F.
I don't know. I think I'm basing it off of expectation, and I said it probably in December that they weren't falling accustomed to almost a playoff hangover in where they were, doing terribly, following it, and then they did exactly that. So I think my argument for F is basically off of they got to the playoff final last season. That they had got some alright additions through over the summer. They started off really, really well, and you could look at them and we could have went, automatic promotion. They'll take that one step further, but then they took about 6 steps backwards. But I'm not going to dispute E either. I'm not going to dispute that.
Let's move on to Doncaster.
League
champions. I don't think there's really many complaints, is there? with a truth be told.
Best possible outcome. They're expecting promotion in some capacity. They got it in the best possible capacity. So there you go.
I mean, it wasn't even just that, wasn't it? Was it? It was Grant McCann, didn't he say it after they lost in the playoffs last year? Oh yeah, we want to be aiming for the title and nothing less.
I only want winners, basically.
Yeah, he literally went, I only want winners, I'm aiming for the league. And yeah, that's what they got. You should put them top of A. Put them over Wimbledon. Put them over Bradford. They are top of A.
I do agree with that. Not like that. I'd probably go for that.
I'd go for that.
Yeah, look, terrific season. Some cracking players that were clearly a little too good for this division, and yeah, it's cumulated a promotion. Gillingham, a lot was expected from them again this season, and they did nothing again this season. If anything, they got worse. But if we're trying to pick out like little causes for encouragement, they did finish the season all right, as solid as we probably expected Gareth Ainsworth's side, but for the money they spent. And probably for the expectations, we thought, I think there was maybe one or two that thought, right, okay, this is the year that they're actually gonna do something, and again, they just haven't. And I'd probably put them in E for me.
I think you're being kind to them, to be honest.
I think
maybe I am.
I think you put them F because the amount of money that was put into that project and the players that they've got, very similar again to a certain team of a certain host on this podcast. The amount of hype around that club over the summer to then turn out, what was it, 17th, something like that. Yes, they ended the season well. They ended the season well, but who cares? That like we all saw them as promotion contenders before a ball was even kicked, and in professional terms, they honked up the gaff.
Well, yeah, you can't have promotion ambitions and finish 17th and call that anything other than an abysmal season. Yes, they've recovered, and I think next season we'll see an improvement, but there's not enough there yet that they haven't made that progress just yet to be able to put them any higher than F.
I'd put them U before I put them in E. I would put them a solid F, but I would be saying to you, put them in U before you put them in E.
Didn't they not win a game in like 2.5 months as well? Aside that had promotion aspirations.
Yeah, it's an interest. Yeah, they're an interesting side, aren't they?
Yeah, I got your point. Actually,
it looks I don't want to say it. It looks a lot better next season because we've said that for the past 2 seasons, and look where it's taken us.
I'm reserving judgment on them.
I'm reserving judgment
for the longest time.
Yeah, I'm not. Can we not do a predictions on Gillingham for next season? Can we just do every team other than Gillingham
games and see how they get on?
Yeah, I think we do our predictions about. No, I think we do it 23 games into the season. Spot on halfway.
Yeah. Fleetwood up next. It's not really much to say, is there? Just very bang average, very mid-table.
It's another D, isn't it?
It's another D, and I can't really put them
literally exactly the same as Cheltenham. Exactly the same.
Well, their stats alone for the season: won 15, drew 15, lost 16, scored 60, conceded 60. Definition of bang average.
Yeah, can't put them any higher, to be quite honest.
They got Peter Wild though. I mean,
he
did well at Barrow. I think Fleetwood probably have more facilities and resources than Barrow. We'll see how that pans out into next season. But yeah, the most average League Two team season award goes to Fleetwood.
It's my boys up next, Grimsby Town, and we've had a pretty good season, haven't we? Compared to what we had done the previous year. I wanted progress from the season. We got progress, and then some sort of just ran out of steam near the end. And to be fair, I think we did kind of balls it up a little bit for a playoff spot. I honestly think if we'd have got a playoff spot, I'd have put us an A. Considering where most people I saw quite a lot of relegation shouts heading into this season, and we're not perfect, we're not the finished article. There's certainly more to come, and I'm really looking forward to see what we can do next season. But if we're judging on league position alone, 9th is our highest finish in 19 years, and the progression's there to see. I can't not say us B. To be honest, I think we've had
You are the more northern Colchester. You are carbon copies of each other.
Yeah, you're building your project sustainably for the exact same reasons as Chesterfield and Colchester. You have to be in B.
Yeah. And yeah, as I said, all eyes on next season. See if we can hold on to a few players. Probably not. I know David Hume's out of contract. George McEachran's probably going to have interest from higher up, and you can't knock them for leaving if they do go. But we know that the approach we have taken this season in terms of recruiting players has done well, and we've got the perfect man to coach these players. I think there's big things to come for us next year. It's about taking that next step up and hopefully cracking into a playoff spot. So we'll have to see what the next few weeks brings in terms of summer transfer window. Harrogate up next. They're a league club again for another season. They were sort of in and around the relegation zone for quite a bit of it. To be fair, they comfortably survived in the end. They had they had pretty good home form. I don't think they're an EFL club again next season. I'd probably put them in E. I know there's probably times where it looked a little bit precarious, if that's the word for it, but they were fine in the end. I didn't really have many concerns. I had a couple, but not many concerns with them.
Well, I mean, they made it up to 18th in the end. They were in that sort of relegation pack, but ultimately they've done enough, and they've done enough by a reasonable margin. I'd say, especially when you combine it with the expectation, i.e., there isn't really one. I think he's perfectly fair.
Yeah, they want to be in League Two. They're in League Two. Job done. Time for another 18th place finish next season. Yeah, that's about it.
MK Don's up next.
You.
It's
you.
I think there's only one answer, isn't there?
Yeah.
For the expectation that was placed on the club with the money they spent, with the players that they had, they should have absolutely romped the league. And where was it they finished in the end? Was it 19th? 3 managers later?
We were expecting to be top 3 with 4th was supposed to be a bad season, so 19th is ridiculous.
Yeah,
and it is the worst season in our long illustrious history. So it has to be you.
A long illustrious history
illustrious,
in which I'm older. We had this discussion the other day, Luke.
Wait, when was MK formed?
2004.
In your defense, Luke, I am younger than your football club by probably a few months. I'm a 20-year-old man. I'm a young wee man, and here you are talking long illustrious history. Are you calling me ancient, Luke? This is terrible. I am fuming.
You've been baited.
I am fuming. He has got out the fishing rod, and I have taken the biggest bite.
Aren't I supposed to be the one doing the fishing?
Oh yeah, because
he.
I gotta go to Grimsby next season just for the. You know what? Actually, saying that, I might go to Grimsby next season, but just for the sake of the fish and chips, because charging £26 or whatever it is for a ticket, are you taking the mick? Are you taking the mick?
He's not even going to go to the game. He's just going to have some fish and chips.
I'm going to have some fish and chips. Go home, no problem. Bob's your uncle.
At least I'll direct you which one is the best chippy. There's quite a few.
Yeah, I don't want to be anywhere near you, by the way, but just tell me where the best chippy is. I'll go there. Yeah, no worries.
Go on the chippy crawl.
That's a bit different to the usual, isn't it? We're going the chippy crawl.
We'll come back to this tier list of chippies.
Just Grimsby edition.
And just Grimsby Cleethorpes, yeah. Right. Steels and Ernie Beckett's can go in A. Pappers can go F, and Mariners outside the ground that can get a U. If you just don't go to Mariners if you ever go to Blundell Park as an away fan.
That's right. If you're going to Grimsby, 99% of the reason you're going to Grimsby is not to watch the football; it is going to a chippy. Yeah. Do not go to the one by the football ground. Football food, 99% of the time, is horrible.
GR8 Great Fish is a solid C, probably B. Pips Fish and Chips. I've not been, but I've heard good things, but probably a little bit expensive. So D. I'm waffling a bit here about chippies in Grimsby and Cleethorpes. So
No, this is.
this is
Can you
content.
tell? Can you tell that the season's over yet? Oh dear.
We need the football back.
content.
Yeah, we
Yeah.
need the football back quite quickly.
Mm.
Yeah, terrible season for MK. Deserve a U graded. Morecambe's next. I think we all expected them to struggle, didn't we?
Yeah.
I think I was quite surprised that they took. I think they took it closer than what I thought in terms of how quickly they were relegated. I think they were relegated with, was it 3 or 4 games left? I expected them to be gone a little bit before that, actually.
I would still go U. I would still go U just off of the basis of, you're not going into a season with the intention of getting relegated. Don't get me wrong. It's not really their fault that they've went down. When you've got an owner that's as incompetent as what they've got, you can't really expect anything more. But I'd still say U because the potential was still there.
I was initially going to argue F, but ultimately they finished 13 points away from 22nd. If they'd been a couple of points away, you could maybe say, okay, yeah, they've had a tough season and got a little bit unlucky. But 13 points, that's it's a lot, isn't it? It's just too many points away.
Yeah,
13 points.
13 points adrift. They finished bottom. There was always up against it, but it's they've gone down with.
They've gone down. I think that's my issue. They've gone down convincingly. There was a little bit of fight about halfway through the season, but it ended up being convincing.
Yeah, it's not for the lack of trying. Ultimately, they've just not been good enough. But again, there's circumstances in that have accumulated in that. Newport, 22nd place finish. It was a transitional season. I think we sort of said at the start of the season it was going to be one that was brilliant, or one that would be terrible, just fallen on its face, and it's proven to be one that's fallen on its face. And I think F for me. I think they've been poor throughout. I mean, the away form says it all. I mean,
3 games won all season away from home.
Yeah, I always had my doubts on Nelson Jardim. Of course, he's not there now. Young squad, not a lot of experience in there. It sort of went how I sort of thought it'd go. Not for the fact that I wanted it to go, but it's just what I thought would happen. There's transitional seasons, and it's the way that I think that Newport approached it. I don't think they approached it right at all.
For me, the highest I can argue is E. That is the highest I can physically argue, and the only reason that the only reason I can even half argue that is basically what we've all established when it comes to Nelson Jardim is that the reason that he got the job in the first place was because nobody openly threw themselves at it, because it was just kind of we had such a gap between Graham Coughlin leaving and then Nelson Jardim being appointed. You don't have that much of a gap for no reason. It's evident that nobody wanted to, get their teeth into it. But I think that the reason I can only argue that is it literally came out in the statement when Jardim left. Hugh Jenkins said the only goal we had this season, while sorting out all the off the pitch stuff and developing these young players and getting them EFL experience, was to stay in the Football League. And he did that. So, I can't discredit him for it. But then at the same time, it was miserable. It was really bad at points. I said this in February. I just wanted the season done. Now, ironically, I want it back because it's looking potentially on the promising next season. But the highest I can physically argue is E. But I'm still going to say F because it just wasn't pretty.
I was more leaning closer to U, certainly than I was to E, just based on, even just from what you've said there, it's almost a naivety in terms of strategy.
I think that's
to
the
have
word.
That many inexperienced players out.
Yeah.
And you're still in League Two by luck more than judgment. If we're being
Yeah.
honest, you came 22nd, and you're in League Two because Carlisle and Morecambe were worse. And
Yeah, I mean, but then in the same breath, you can only finish above what's in front of you. But then you can also argue you put that team and that system into any other League Two bottom two scrap, and we're probably in there. So
but you just didn't help yourselves.
that's the thing.
Like-
That's the thing. I won't argue with F, even to an extent. I wouldn't argue with you. But that's the only justification I could have for putting us as high as E. But I'm still agreeing with F there.
I mean, I wouldn't say it was as catastrophic as the likes of Carlisle or MK.
Yeah,
I won't say it was as good either.
yeah. No, because I think putting us in. I think the only way you put us in U is if this had all come out. We had said, "Oh, the entire intention with Nelson Jardine was to stay up," and then we went down. If we would have went down, U, fair enough. But he did what he was assigned to do, and that's about all you can.
Yeah.
That's about all you can want.
Yeah, and if that was the aim, there's only so much you could say on that. I mean, you've achieved it, but yeah, it's no. I think F is
yeah.
about right.
F's definitely there for a transitional season. It's not a Barrow, and it's certainly not a Colchester or a Grimsby. It's just
No,
it maybe builds a bit of a platform for next season, but we'll see how it goes.
Yeah. Notts County up next. I mean, they're finishing the playoffs, lost in the semi-final to AFC Wimbledon. I think obviously their aspirations was playoffs, but or automatic promotion, I should say. They did make the playoffs. It wasn't pretty, especially near the end, which is probably the big reason why Stuart Maynard has lost his job. It'll be interesting to see who they appoint. I'm looking at that glaring gap in C. I don't think. I mean, it was dire near the end. I think probably because of the games that I'd watched Notts, I just weren't convinced with them at all. But was it as bad a season as maybe the likes of you see the teams in D like Fleetwood, like Cheltenham? I just don't think it was. Ultimately, they still made the playoffs, but I just don't think they were that impressive at all. I'd probably put them in C, the first one to put them in.
Yeah, I think C would make a lot of sense. I think fan expectation comes into it a lot. That those fans are expecting to be promoted in some capacity. They want to be in that sort of top three area. And as you can tell, promotion was the whole aim because ultimately Maynard's lost his job for a miserable playoff campaign, essentially. The bare minimum was to, reach the playoffs and probably win them as well. So to not even get to that final bit, it's not great. Obviously, it is a lottery, so to have your whole kind of, I don't know, legacy as a manager, sort of depending on essentially two or three games, it's tricky. But I mean, they had themselves there or thereabouts. So I think C is reasonable. It's just they didn't have that sort of extra mile. And with all the expectation as well, I think that weighs them down a little bit.
Yeah, I'm not even going to add anything on to what Luke said there. He's spot on. It's bare minimum, isn't it? But it should have been more. So it's C.
Big summer ahead for them, that's for sure. Port Vale up next. I mean, yeah, they got promoted, didn't they? We expected them to get promoted.
As well.
They did have a couple of rocky moments, but near the end, they've just turned it on, didn't they? And they've gone up quite deservedly in the end.
Yeah.
I'd have potentially been slightly controversial and maybe said B just because the expectation was that high in the first place.
Yeah,
if you
maybe.
think back to the beginning of the season, you had us and Port Vale. Everyone was saying, right, that's your top two, done, dusted, that's it. And yes, they did it, but they only just did it.
Yeah,
they weren't the runaways
Yeah,
I think we were expecting them to be. They still got the job done, but it wasn't as clean as I personally think it should have been.
I think then your argument is, though, that Doncaster didn't win the league until the final day, and then their entire intent was to go and win the league, and they didn't do it until the last day. They cut it close. They weren't ready in that push until the final 3-4 games of the season. I think if you're arguing Port Vale for just about getting over the line, I think you do the same with Doncaster.
Yeah.
So for that argument, I can't say anything other than A.
Yeah.
I can understand that.
I can
I
see
can
where you're coming
understand the
from.
justification. Yeah.
I can see where you're coming from, but I'm not sure I agree with it entirely.
I mean, yes, it's an interest because you say if MK would have finished third, would you have put them in B if they would have finished third? Because they've got that automatic promotion, but you expect them to romp the league. But
Ultimately, a
I
promotion.
it's an interesting one, isn't
I
it?
probably would have done, just because our expectation coming into this season was, right, we're winning the league. We didn't.
Yeah, I think.
Like,
Yeah, it's an interesting one, but I think if you're making that argument in my eyes of Port Vale, you've got to do the same for Doncaster, and just off the back end that they both got promoted first and second. They did what they needed to do. You can't argue with it. But again, I can exactly see where you're coming from.
Yeah. Salford up next. Solid season for them. Just missed out on the playoffs on the final day, dropping points at Carlisle.
B as well.
Yeah, it probably is a B. I think
Say it's literally
done a little bit better than what I
Colchester,
thought they did.
Grimsby, and Salford in that same kind of bracket. Even
Yeah.
Chesterfield
and
to an extent.
Chesterfield, same reasons. Project
argue-
sides,
I'd
still
argue
building.
Chesterfield maybe a bit. Again, if you were to do these in literal ranking order, Doncaster first, Bradford second, etc. I think you would put Chesterfield probably above all the three, just because they were the ones who went and got into the playoffs. But yeah, it's the same, isn't it? It's a project season. It's kind of a rebuild off of a bumpy season, and they've done well.
Mm-hmm. This is the team in which
no, where do we put these?
It's going to be an awful one. Swindon Town started the season miserably, got Ian Holloway in, and it seems like the only way he's been up since. Ultimately, he finished like 11th in the end or something like that.
Yeah.
I mean,
12th.
I would say, based on pre-season expectation and all the owner fuss and all that kind of stuff, I'd say C. I'd go C, but I could understand D, and I could even understand B to an extent. Can we duplicate Swindon 3 times and put them in D, C, and B?
Put them in
because
each
that's probably. I'd put them middle of the road. I'd put them C. I would put them C.
They've been very impressive at times. I mean, some of the goals that they've scored and how, they've scored a lot of goals and they've won quite a lot of games. It felt, I think.
For a stats of a club like Swindon.
The thing is that we were impressed with their summer business and everything, and we thought, you know what, they might be able to overcome ownership problems, all the rest of it, and still have a good season. Obviously, fell flat on its face straight away, but they've then recovered it, finished top half, not too far away. I think it was 7 points off playoffs. I think based on that, C would be reasonable.
Yeah,
I think B would be too much, personally. I think C
D
would be about fair.
Yeah, I think
B would be unfair.
B is too much. I think D is too harsh. I'd go because you got to factor that ownership thing into account. I think that's the thing with Swindon. We didn't really know what their expectation were because it was anywhere in between. Like I saw some people put them top 7. I put some of them to put them to go down. So that we can't use that as a basis because that wasn't helpful at all. They're just a confusing football club. They really are.
Yeah. It's tough to say, isn't it? I don't think they've been as bad as B, but I don't think they've been as good as B.
I think the fair tier there is C in my eyes.
But that's not knocking what Ian Holloway's done. He's done a terrific job since he's walked in the door.
It's the if buts and maybes, right? If Ian Holloway was there at the start of the season, would they have got playoffs? If you base it off the form that they had got when he was there, probably. And then you'd say B. You could even argue A at that point.
It'll make an easier conversation if that was the case.
Yeah.
Right, 2 more to go through. Tranmere struggled for a large part of the season, picked up under Andy Crosby near the end, which, again, in the end, survived quite comfortably when it looked like for a large part of it they were going to take the drop.
I think for expectation, I'd be putting them quite low. I'd be
Yeah,
putting them E or F.
I
I'd be
think we
putting them on one of
expected.
those two.
I
I'd be
remember when
going
we did
lower.
the. Remember when we did
I'd
the
be saying as
prediction?
low as you,
I'd,
just based on we were talking about them as a potential
I,
playoff side, like, and
I think
they built
that's
this squad of
We're going
young
off about
players,
how
and
Nigel
it's dead
Atkins is
flat.
God, weren't we?
yeah. But then at the same time, if we're putting Tranmere and you, do we put Gillingham and you as well? Because they were kind of in that equal stature of
No,
they're gonna
but Tranmere were looking like they were going to get relegated for a lot of this season. Gillingham
yeah.
were bad, but they never got to the point of, oh, that's Gillingham relegated then. I feel like we reached that point with Tranmere multiple times over the course of the season,
Yeah,
and it's only Crosby that's helped lift them back out of that.
I think it. Yeah, now that you are mentioning that, it is between F and U, and I don't want to spend a million years talking about this one because there's a team after this that God knows where we're going to put them.
Be another hour.
Yeah, we're going to be here another hour now. It's a 2 hour long podcast. Luke, I like your argument. I'm not gonna lie. I like your argument, but I can't. There's so many parts of me that can argue both, but I am relatively that point Luke made was good. I'm gonna say you. I am gonna say you.
Going off what we thought they'd do. I think, as I've just mentioned, we was going off by saying how Nigel Atkins was God, basically, and thought they were going to do really well under him. That's how well they did last season. It has just fallen on its face, isn't it? And if ultimately Andy Crosby has gone in there and saved them from dropping, because I think if they'd have kept with Nigel Atkins, it could have been a different scenario, especially with how Carlisle picked up near the end a little bit. Yeah, I can't really argue with you. I was going to put them F, truth be told.
Yeah, no, I originally thought F. I originally thought F because I feel like F's that tier that you have to be like a new level of bad. But and maybe I was blindsided by, you can be blindsided by that really good run they went on towards the end of the season to push them away from it. But when you look at what they were doing in pre-season and what we thought Nigel Adkins was, they should have never been in that position to begin with, let alone stay in it until the final 3-4 games of the season.
Even just the difference in expectation between them and the teams around them. They had that playoff expectation.
Yeah.
Harrogate Accrington never had playoff expectations at all.
Even then, now that I'm thinking about it, the fact that we've put MK in you, I think that kind of almost balances up with Tranmere as well.
Yeah, good point.
My WhatsApp is going off like a ping pong here. I really hope you can't hear it because it is winding me up massively.
You know what? I've learned something. I've learned to do was just put my phone on do not disturb.
No, because my issue is it's not my phone; it's my PC. So I have WhatsApp on the PC, and it's really annoying when you mute it because you can mute it for like 30 minutes, and then another chat comes up, and then you have to mute that as well. Yeah, so it's a nightmare.
The scenes.
I'm not gonna lie with you. I blame Ryan entirely for adding us to about 60 million group chats on WhatsApp. I don't know what's going on.
Yeah, it's been hectic over there, but that's not.
Yeah,
that's not.
It's all Ryan's fault. just sack Ryan.
Yeah.
Yes, I got the line in.
Yes, get it in. Come on, if you know, you know. Right, we're putting off this last team, aren't we? We're talking about the Bottlers. Sorry, the Saddlers, Walsall.
I don't know.
Where do you start?
No, because our pre-season expectation was what? Mid-table. But then they flew past that to what was it at the peak? Was it 14, 15 clear at their peak? And they had a game in hand within that. So that if they would have stayed within that top three, no question, But the fact that they were in that position and then still somehow managed to not get promoted, off of that basis, you say you. Because if you go any other team in that position, you wouldn't imagine that they would have fumbled it as bad. Where
But
do you
that's
put them?
that's if you're judging the season from January onwards, though. We're
Yeah.
judging the whole season and the whole expectation. As you said, they had mid-table expectations. They've finished as high as what, fourth or fifth or fourth.
Fourth, yeah.
Um,
But
and yes, they've fallen short, and they should have absolutely 1,000,000% gone up. And based on that second half of the season alone, it would be a U. But when you add in the first half, I think it balances out. I'd actually go as high as a C.
I think the reason I can say C. C I'm not mad with. But I think even the reason that, I'm if any other team would have finished fourth and they would have done it progressively, let's say Grimsby would have done it, we would have put them in A, right? But I think it was the way they didn't get promoted. It was the manner of the way they crashed out the playoffs and that they were in the playoffs to begin with, because it wasn't a steady climb where they narrowly missed out on automatic promotion. It was a dramatic fall from miles clear at the top of the league that they've managed to throw. But then again, the preseason expectation was mid-table. So if you base it off of that, they've flown past expectations. But
Well, yeah, I mean,
if you base it off the manner of how they messed it up, it is woeful. It is
well, yeah,
terrible.
the only reason they have that expectation of oh yes, U season is because they got themselves up there in the first place, and you have to credit them for doing that in the
But
first place.
I then think I then go back to the saying that I think we've said about 1 billion times on this podcast. It is not at all how you start a season. It's where you end up and how you
How you
finish
finish it and where you
And
end
they
up.
finished it in potentially the worst way they could have finished it.
Yeah, look, I pretty much agree with the fact that going into the season, we don't think we had much hope or much expectation for them. Ultimately, for where they did finish, they've exceeded expectations by quite a distance. It's ultimately the fact that we're so far clear and the fact that the second half of the season has been a total disaster. Didn't get automatic promotions, had to go through the playoffs, which was bad enough. The fact that they go and lose it, they didn't show up at Wembley on Monday, truth be told. They didn't show up.
Not to even mention it. We can say this is a joke, right? But I think it generally has some meaning and purpose behind it. The only reason they didn't get top 3 was because they lost a lone player. If you are, I really do not, because you think about it. They lost Nathan Lowe. What are they? They won the game afterwards, and then you think, oh yeah, they're completely fine. And then it went off like a switch, and they dropped, and we were sat here every single week going, yeah, this will be the week they win. This will be, but it never came. It never came. I think if your entire season and how it's panned out and progressed is based off of one player that isn't even yours to begin with, can you put them B or A? Probably you can. You can.
No, it can't be VRA because ultimately,
No, I'm not having that.
Yeah,
second
you
half of the
can't. You
season
can't.
alone
But
rules out those
that's the
options.
thing.
But for C, makes sense.
That's the thing. We've based every single other team off of preseason expectation, the season before, and then how they, what they've managed to achieve. If we would have ignored the first half and the second half, and we say that their season was split evenly throughout the entire course of the season, they won games here, lost them there, you then say B.
Can I just say something about the Nathan Lowe thing as well?
Yeah, go on.
I know that it was. I think they probably should have expected him to go in January.
Yeah.
For what they had done, and it's been clear in the end. I do think that if they'd had him until the end of the season, things might have been different. I think their decisions to bring, ultimately, you look at the January recruitment, and it was awful. I mean, even Wheatley barely played. Ellis Harrison didn't really do a great deal, and I'm not really sold on Levi Amanci. I just don't think. I think he probably had a little bit of an indicator there, but I didn't I didn't foresee it that bad, but I mean,
I think this
look,
is my. So we've talked about Bradford, right? And we've talked about Bradford, Andy Cook being their main talisman for a number of seasons, the one who puts the ball in the back of the net. Any other season they lose Andy Cook other than this one, they fall off a cliff. But they've managed to use the squad that they've got to get over the line. Walsall have lost their equivalent of Andy Cook, who's a lone player from Stoke. And they then spent that entire second half of the season not being able to manage without him. They needed one more point from in hindsight, they needed one more point from any of the games they lost. Bear in mind, you're including the drop points here against Harrogate. You're including Morecambe. You're including Carlisle.
and you
You're
see what I
including
mean?
all the teams that we've put in you and we've put as having horrible seasons. They lost to Accrington, if I'm not mistaken, at their home ground. They lost to just about every team. One more point in hindsight gets them promoted.
And I was banging the drum for quite a while. I was looking at those like last 5 or 6 games that they had where they played the likes of Harrogate and Accrington Stanley. The games in there that they probably likes of Newport as well. Games in there in which, I mean, yeah, one more win probably would have done it in the end. But the fact that they didn't win any of them, I know they won on the final day against Crewe, but they had chances to put it right there, and they completely failed every single time.
Again, they had chances to put it to bed 10 games before that final game of the season.
They've only got themselves to blame for it.
Yeah, that's the thing, and it's it almost feels like we're drifting away from the tier list here.
Yeah, we're
just trying. No, it's not even that, because like it's so interesting to try and dissect what has happened at Walsall this season. We could do an entire podcast on that alone, because it is such a baffling bottle job of a season, because they were in dreamland in December. They were in absolute dreamland. They were miles clear. Half of them were probably booking tickets to Cardiff away and Plymouth and everyone else in between. They were sitting there. They were like, "Oh bloody hell, we're going to Leighton next season, boys. No problem." We're not bothered at all here, but you cannot forgive that second half. You cannot forgive that second half of the season, and the fact that they spent how many games do you reckon they had between Nathan Lowe leaving and the end of the season? Would it have been more than half of the season, or just slightly under?
When did he go? It was like mid-Jan, wasn't it?
Mid-Jan, so they would have had. Let's just say, for argument's sake, they had 20 games without Nathan Lowe. The fact that wasn't it one game they won in between all that? Was it one or two that they won between that entire period? And again, you talk those final 5 games, they played the likes of Harrogate, Newport, Accrington at home.
What was it? What was the record? They won like 2 in like 21, 22 games.
Yeah,
didn't
2. It was something along those lines. Yeah, and for tier list sake, I think they go in C, just off of how preseason has went, or how preseason expectation turned out to what it was. But again, if you're balancing off of how we've judged everyone else, you'd put them in B, because nobody expected them to do it, to get into playoffs, and they managed to. And they managed to get within 1 point of automatic promotion.
Yeah.
But the manner in which that they got into the playoffs, that's what puts them down into C. That's what puts them down. Even if they would have just got into those automatic promotion spots, A, no problem. You can entirely ignore that second half of the season, just off of the basis that, yeah, they got over the line. Because we're saying exactly the same thing with Port Vale, and with Wimbledon, Bradford, etc. They would have won the playoff. If they would have won the playoffs, where do we put them? Do you put them B? Do you put them A, just off the basis that they got promoted, or the fact that they should have never been there in the first place?
Yeah, right. Look,
It's an
we need to put them somewhere. We are going on a bit here.
We'll put them C.
I'd say C. If they'd won playoffs, I'd have said B. But I think C would be fair.
Yeah,
I probably agree.
I think we need to make an entire podcast on this because I feel like I could waffle for this for the next hour.
We've just done one as it is. It's an hour 15 long already.
Yeah, Walsall
Sorry,
fans,
Ryan.
let us know where you think we should have put you.
Yeah, where do
can't
we
figure it
put you?
out.
Because Walsall Football Club fries my head.
You can make an argument for them lower. Actually, you just can't.
That's the thing. You can make an argument for D. You can say they were in the prime position to get promoted and they didn't do it. You can make an argument for D. I won't say D because nobody expected them to get in playoffs to begin with. So C. But you can make that argument for D.
Wait, because to simplify it, their first half of the season was A, their second half of the season was U. That puts them somewhere in the middle. They were, 1 point off, and they still got playoffs.
And they got to the
That leads them to
final.
maybe slightly higher,
Yeah,
I'd say C.
I think because they got to the final as well, maybe. If they would have got out in the semis, maybe you say D. But
Yeah.
Look, I don't know. Come on. Guys, my head's fried. I need to go to bed.
Yeah, let's end it there. I've got work tomorrow. And that's where we'll leave it. If you're watching this on YouTube, you can see where we've put everyone.
It's a very nice balanced tier list. I'm liking the look of that.
It is. Oh, you know what? I'm going to change it.
Yes.
I'm going to change it.
Yes. I was going to mention it. I was going to mention it. Yeah.
The one I've changed, Bromley A. I just think their season's been fantastic for their first year.
Can you make a new tier for MK very quickly? Thank you.
Can I do it real quickly?
Don't wait. Adam
Rowe.
Adam Rowe. Below.
No, we don't want them above.
No, we don't want above.
Delete row. Row below. Add a row below.
Add a row below. You've added 2 rows below.
I've added 2. This is going well.
Oh, this is.
And we'll just
Great job.
There we go. There we go. And there is our completed tier list.
Right, we'll end it there. Thank you. Thank you guys for listening as always. If you did enjoy the pod, make sure you hit that like button, subscribe if you're new. We'll be back. I don't even know. I know Luke's got a quiz coming up, but to be quite honest, I want a break at some point. We'll start, and we need to start planning for next season at some point. So, yeah, we'll leave it at that, I guess. Thank you guys for listening as always. Let us know if you agreed with all these opinions. Probably not. A couple of good discussions there. We have dragged this one out a little bit. We'll leave it there. Thank you guys for listening, for tuning in, and we'll see you in the next one. Take care for now.